Very good morning, everybody. Can you see the slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Uh, Last time we had discussed regarding some of the rapid regulatory mechanisms and intermediate regulatory mechanisms, okay, and long-term regulatory mechanisms. Long-term regulatory mechanisms compared to all three mechanisms, that is rapid, intermediate and long-term, these are most effective and their effectiveness increases over time, these long-term mechanisms, and they bring the blood pressure all the way back to normal, and they can operate for years together, unlike the rapid regulatory mechanisms which operate for only 1 or 2 days. These long-term mechanisms, they operate for years. So I had finished with this long-term mechanisms wherein we had discussed regarding the direct renal mechanism and indirect renal mechanism. In indirect renal mechanism, I had discussed regarding renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. So this was the mechanism, and this was left last time. Humoral mechanisms that are involved in the regulation of arterial blood pressure. Um, there are hormones like epinephrine, norepinephrine, vasopressin, antidiuretic hormone, and endothelial mechanisms like nitric oxide and endothelin 1. Okay, these can also be rearranged as vasoconstrictors and vasodilators. Epinephrine and norepinephrine, antidiuretic hormone, endothelin 1, angiotensin 2, they are vasoconstrictors. Atrial natriuretic peptide, nitric oxide, histamine are vasodilators. The list is long, but I have put only the important ones here. Epinephrine and norepinephrine, their effects are similar to the effects of stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. Right, epinephrine and norepinephrine, they are the humoral component of the sympathetic nervous activity. And epinephrine and norepinephrine, they are released from the adrenal medulla. So this is the adrenal medulla, which is the endocrine gland located on top of each kidney. And when you take a cut section of the adrenal gland, it has two parts. The inner part is called as the medulla and the outer part is called as the cortex. Okay, so the medulla secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine on sympathetic stimulation. The cortex secretes steroid hormones, okay, like cortisol, aldosterone. Okay, so these are some of the steroid hormones. So medulla secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. The chromaffin cells in the medulla, they are secreting epinephrine and norepinephrine on sympathetic stimulation, and the effects of epinephrine and norepinephrine are similar to similar to the actual sympathetic nervous system. So on the heart, increases the heart rate, increases the force of conduction, increases the excitability, and increases the speed of conduction. On the blood vessels, epinephrine and norepinephrine, they bring about vasoconstriction. So all these two hormones have the effect of increasing the blood pressure. Okay. Now, pheochromocytoma, it is a tumor of the chromaffin tissue which contains sympathetic nerve cells. So chromaffin cells are the ones which are secreting epinephrine and norepinephrine. Pheochromocytoma is a tumor of this chromaffin cells, and when there is excess secretion of epinephrine, norepinephrine, it results in increased blood pressure, and this is one of the causes for secondary hypertension. I will be studying in detail later. Okay, just remember this term, pheochromocytoma, which is a tumor of the adrenal medulla, particularly the chromaffin cells which secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine, and this is the cause for secondary hypertension. Then the second important hormone is antidiuretic hormone. It is secreted from the posterior pituitary. Okay, it's also called as vasopressin. It is a potent vasoconstrictor. It brings about constriction of the blood vessels. Okay, and it is antidiuretic hormone, that is, it prevents diuresis or it brings about retention of salt and water by the kidneys. Okay, so whenever the salt and water will be retained by the kidneys, the blood volume increases and in turn blood pressure increases. However, this antidiuretic hormone is not involved in moment-to-moment blood pressure control. Okay, so whenever there is a fall in blood pressure, the antidiuretic hormone is released, which acts on the blood vessels, which acts on the kidneys. Okay, on the vessels, it brings about vasoconstriction, increases blood pressure. On the kidneys, it brings about salt and water retention and increases the blood volume, thereby increasing blood pressure. But day-to-day regulation of blood pressure, this is not involved. Okay. And this is atrial natriuretic peptide. Okay, natriuretic, that is, it is increasing the excretion of sodium by the kidneys. Okay, so atrial natriuretic peptide is secreted by the atrial myocytes, right? So this is the endocrine function of the heart. So the atrial myocytes secrete a hormone called as atrial natriuretic peptide, right? And these atrial myocytes secrete atrial natriuretic peptide whenever there is increased filling. So increased filling of the right atrium, increasing the right atrial pressure brings about secretion of atrial natriuretic peptide. Now what this atrial natriuretic peptide does, as the name indicates, natriuretic, it brings about natriuresis, that is increased excretion of salt. Increased excretion of salt is followed by increased excretion of water, that is diuresis, right? Then it brings about smooth muscle relaxation, that is vasodilation, and it reduces renin secretion from the juxtaglomerular apparatus of the kidney. So all these actions decrease the blood pressure. Okay, so this atrial natriuretic peptide is metabolized by endopeptidases, right? So what has been tried is neutral endopeptidase inhibitors have been tried as a therapeutic agent for treating chronic hypertension. Okay, because atrial natriuretic peptide is metabolized by endopeptidases. So in hypertension, if the atrial natriuretic peptide levels increase, then the blood pressure will be decreased. So they are trying with this neutral endopeptidase inhibitors. Then in the endothelial mechanism, that is the cells lining the vascular endothelium. Okay, so this comes under endothelial mechanism. So endothelial cells lining the blood vessels, they secrete nitric oxide. Okay, nitric oxide is a potent vasodilator. It acts on the vascular smooth muscles and brings about vasodilation. So inability of the endothelial cells to produce nitric oxide may be a cause of high blood pressure hypertension in some patients. Okay, so this vascular endothelial cells synthesize nitric oxide with the help of the enzyme nitric oxide synthase from arginine. Okay, and nitric oxide, once it is released from the endothelial cells, it diffuses to the vascular smooth muscles and brings about vasodilatation. So it's a potent vasodilator. Another endothelial mechanism is endothelin 1. It is a vasoconstrictor and again it is secreted by the vascular endothelial cells. Okay, and this endothelin 1 acts via ETA and ETB receptors on the again vascular smooth muscles. So and endothelial mechanisms you have two. One is nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator, and one is endothelin 1, which is a vasoconstrictor. This was regarding the miscellaneous mechanisms, and so coming to today's class proper, pathophysiology of hypertension. Today I'll be discussing regarding pathophysiology of hypertension. Okay, so why it is essential for you to know regarding the pathophysiology of hypertension? Only the most basic things I'll be discussing here. Okay, pathophysiology of hypertension can be asked as a part of 10 marks question as a case scenario. So I have at the end of this class I'll be sharing some of the case scenarios regarding hypertension also. Right now, there is a increasing incidence of hypertension. Okay, approximately 970 million people worldwide are hypertension, and it is estimated that about 1.56 billion adults will be hypertensive in another 4 years. Okay, and hypertension has whenever the blood pressure is increased and if it is not adequately controlled, it has adverse effects on some of the organs like heart. It causes coronary artery disease, it causes myocardial infarction, it causes heart failure, right? Then it has adverse effects on the CNS. It is a very common cause of stroke, okay, in patients. Then it has adverse effects on the kidney. It's a cause of renal failure. It has adverse effects on the retina. Okay, so these are some of the adverse effects of hypertension, and all these can be prevented if hypertension is detected at an early stage and it is well treated. Okay, that's why it is very essential for you to understand the pathophysiology of hypertension. So 1.56 billion adults by 2025 means everyone who will be treating patients in your OPD everybody will be getting these patients. So you must understand what is the pathophysiology of hypertension, what are its adverse consequences, why it is essential to treat, why it is essential to help people to follow a proper lifestyle and to give advice to the people. Okay, so it is the potentially preventable disease, that is you can prevent the adverse consequences of hypertension. Right. Now, what is hypertension? You people have repeatedly showed in my slides throughout these sessions when we were discussing regarding the physiology of blood pressure. Okay. So again, I'll be repeating. It is persistent and sustained elevation of systemic arterial blood pressure with respect to the age and sex of an individual. Okay. So whenever you are recording the blood pressure of a subject in an OPD and you're finding increased blood pressure, it may not necessarily be hypertension. There are several other causes. So always it should be persistent and sustained elevation of systemic arterial blood pressure. Suppose I exercise, immediately you record my blood pressure will be high. That doesn't mean that I am suffering from hypertension. The elevated blood pressure should be sustained, it should be persistent for a longer period of time. On several settings when you're recording, if you find the same increased blood pressure, then it is hypertension. So whenever you are recording blood pressure on a patient, you are going to give a rest of 5 to 10 minutes and then record the blood pressure. Immediately when the patient arrives, you should not record the blood pressure because it will not reflect the actual value. Okay, so you are going to give a rest period of 5 to 10 minutes and then record the blood pressure. Classification of blood pressure, JNC, Joint National Committee 8 classification. So according to this classification, normal blood pressure is less than 120 and diastolic blood pressure less than 80. Okay. Then they have introduced this term pre-hypertension, that is blood pressure range between 120 to 139 systolic blood pressure or 80 to 89 diastolic blood pressure. So pre-hypertension, again the blood pressure in pre-hypertensive individuals should be regularly monitored because they are at higher risk of developing hypertension in the near future. Okay, then anything above 140 systolic and 90 diastolic is considered as hypertension. Okay, I repeat, anything above 140 systolic or 90 diastolic is considered as hypertension, and there has been again grading. 140 to 159 systolic or 90 to 99 diastolic is called stage 1 hypertension. More than 160 systolic and more than 100 diastolic is considered stage 2 hypertension. This is JNC National Committee classification. Classification by the European Society of Hypertension, European Society of Cardiology. Okay, they have not used the term pre-hypertension in this classification. You don't find the term pre-hypertension. Okay, again the hypertension has been classified as grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3. So again, anything above 140 systolic, above 90 diastolic is hypertension. These are different grades. Okay. Interesting thing here, what you are supposed to notice is isolated systolic hypertension. Isolated systolic hypertension. Systolic blood pressure more than 140 and diastolic blood pressure less than 90. That is, systolic blood pressure is increased, diastolic blood pressure is less than 90 is isolated systolic hypertension. Okay, it is usually seen in elderly because of the arteriosclerosis or the decreased arterial compliance, right? And it is essential to treat isolated systolic hypertension patients also. Okay, so these gradings you have to remember. Okay, and pay attention to the isolated systolic hypertension also. Although the diastolic blood pressure is normal, the systolic blood pressure is increased above 140. Okay, that's why it is called isolated systolic. That is, only systolic blood pressure is increased, diastolic blood pressure is normal. Okay. Now, coming to the types of hypertension, there are two types: primary hypertension and secondary hypertension. Primary hypertension is also called as essential hypertension. Here, essential is a misnomer. It doesn't mean that the increased blood pressure is essential for the health or essential for life. It's a misnomer. Okay, primary or essential hypertension. Okay, Primary essential hypertension means where there is no detectable underlying cause for increased blood pressure. That is, you can't detect any underlying cause for the increased blood pressure. That is called as essential hypertension. And most of the cases of hypertension are essential hypertension. That is, 90% of all hypertensive patients are they are falling in the category of primary hypertension. That is, you can't detect any cause for the hypertension or the increased blood pressure. However, these are the supposed causes for the genesis of the hypertension. Either there is increased sympathetic activity, increased renin secretion, increased blood volume, excess salt intake, increased production of salt and water retaining hormones. Okay, and it is discussed earlier, that is antidiuretic hormone is a salt and water retaining hormone. Increased synthesis of vasoconstrictors. We had discussed endothelin 1, angiotensin 2, right? Vasopressin, all these are vasoconstrictors. Decreased synthesis of vasodilators, that is nitric oxide, histamine, these are all vasodilators. So these are the proposed mechanisms for primary hypertension. Clear? So either sympathetic activity is increased, or renin secretion is increased, blood volume is high, salt intake is excessive, or increased production of salt and water retaining hormones, increased synthesis of vasoconstrictors, decreased synthesis of vasodilators. These things you have to remember, because when you're discussing, when I'm discussing regarding the management of hypertension, all these will be addressed. Either you can try to control the sympathetic hyperactivity or try to reduce the high blood volume, clear, or you give the vasodilators or give the calcium channel blocker. So you are addressing these when you are treating patients with hypertension. Okay, so these are the probable mechanisms of primary or essential hypertension. Then what are the risk factors for essential hypertension? First one is heredity. It's a very important risk factor. Okay, it is inherited as a dominant trait. That is, if both parents are hypertensive, then the chances of children developing hypertension is 50%, right? If one of the parent is hypertensive, then the chance of children developing hypertension is 25%. Okay, so this is a very important or prime risk factor for essential hypertension. That is, family history of hypertension is important. Second, age. You all know, as the age advances, the blood pressure increases. This is because of thickening of the vessel wall. Second one is decreased compliance. That is, the arteries are becoming stiff, they are becoming less compliant. Okay, that's why the blood pressure increases with advancing age. Okay, so the whatever may be the blood pressure at the age of 18, my blood pressure may not be the same at the age of 50 or 60 years, because as age advances, the vessels become stiffer, they become less compliant, therefore the blood pressure increases. Third is gender. Okay, so when you are comparing men and women, hypertension is less common in females before the menopause. This is because of gonadal hormones estrogen and progesterone. After menopause, the incidence of hypertension in males and females is similar. Only before menopause, because of estrogen and progesterone, the prevalence or incidence of hypertension is less in females. So what estrogen does? Estrogen decreases blood cholesterol levels and slows the process of atherosclerosis. What progesterone does? Progesterone brings about relaxation of the vascular smooth muscle and brings about vasodilation. So blood pressure itself is about 5 millimeters less in females as compared to males of the same age group, and moreover the incidence of hypertension is less in females before menopause. But after menopause, the incidence is similar in men and women. And when you are considering the race, black Africans are more prone to develop hypertension. The fifth risk factor is stress, stressful life. Okay, so stress predisposes to hypertension. How it predisposes? One is it increases the sympathetic hyperactivity. So stressful job, stressful life. Okay, stress is one of the important cause of essential hypertension by increasing sympathetic activity and increases the blood lipid levels, that is hyperlipidemia, right? So we had discussed regarding heredity, age, gender, race and stress. Smoking, risk factor for essential hypertension. So smoking increases the levels of nicotine and carbon monoxide in the blood, and both are potent vasoconstrictors. Okay, so by causing vasoconstriction, they increase the arterial blood pressure. Then obesity is another important risk factor, right? So obesity increases the susceptibility to hypertension by increasing the blood lipid levels and increasing the process of atherosclerosis. Again, increased blood lipid levels, that is hyperlipidemia, they also facilitate atherosclerosis and increase the risk of hypertension. Then sedentary lifestyle. Okay, so sitting is the new smoking now, right? So sedentary lifestyle is an important risk factor for essential hypertension. Sedentary lifestyle, by increasing the chances of obesity, by increasing the blood lipid levels, they increase the risk for essential hypertension. So nowadays the tagline is sitting is the new smoking. Okay. Then type A personality, right? Type A personality is again a risk factor for essential hypertension. So this type A personality, they are more ambitious, then they are very well organized, and they want to achieve things. So they are almost, type A personality is like a stressful personality. So they have an increased incidence of essential hypertension. Okay. Then environmental factors like type of occupation, what is the family size. Okay, all these factors also influence the risk of developing essential hypertension. Then salt sensitivity. Some of the individuals, they are prone for salt sensitive hypertension, that is increased incidence of increased intake of salt increases the risk for developing hypertension. Okay, salt sensitivity. And alcohol intake, excess and long-term intake of alcohol also increases the risk of essential hypertension. So these are some of the risks. One is heredity, that is a family history of hypertension, then with advancing age, then gender and race and type of personality, then stress, then the sedentary lifestyle, hyperlipidemia, obesity, smoking, then excess alcohol intake, salt sensitivity. These are all risk factors for essential hypertension. Okay. So all this was regarding primary hypertension, where a definite underlying cause for hypertension cannot be delineated or it cannot be found out. Now we have secondary hypertension, where it is secondary to some other disease. Okay, it is called as secondary hypertension. About 5 to 10% of the hypertensives are belong to this secondary hypertension. Majority of the hypertensives, whatever you get, they are primary hypertensives or essential hypertensives. 5 to 10% of the individuals have a high blood pressure which is secondary to some other disease. Okay, if that disease is treated, then the high blood pressure levels will be controlled. So though they are called as secondary hypertension. So the increased blood pressure may be because of renal diseases like glomerulonephritis, pyelonephritis, polycystic kidney disease, renin producing tumors, then renal artery stenosis. So hypertension is secondary to glomerulonephritis or secondary to renin producing tumor. So if you are treating this renin producing tumor, if you are treating the renal artery stenosis, then the blood pressure can be controlled. Okay, then it could be secondary to endocrine diseases like hyperaldosteronism, increased production of aldosterone, Cushing syndrome, increased production of steroid hormones, acromegaly, increased production of growth hormone, pheochromocytoma. It is a tumor discussed previously, tumor of the chromatin cells of the adrenal medulla which secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. So these are all endocrinal hypertension. Then neurogenic hypertension, acute increase in intracranial pressure. If the intracranial pressure is relieved, it is brought back to normal, then the blood pressure comes back to normal. Then other conditions like chronic use of oral contraceptive pills, pregnancy-induced hypertension, coarctation of aorta. So coarctation is narrowing of the aorta or constriction of the particular site of aorta. So these are some of the causes for secondary hypertension. The list is long. I have selected only the few important ones. Okay, so that is hypertension occurring secondary to some other disease. This is secondary hypertension. What are the adverse effects of hypertension? Why we must be worried of high blood pressure levels? Okay, Clear. Why we should be worried? Because it has adverse effects on blood vessels, it has adverse effect on the heart, CNS, retina, and the kidneys. Okay. What it does? When you're looking at the heart has to, it is a pump. It continuously contracts and pump blood so that blood reaches to all the tissues and they're getting perfused. Now, when blood pressure increases, the workload on the heart increases. It has to pump with greater force so that the blood is pushed into the vessels. Okay. So once the workload on the heart increases, there is muscle hypertrophy. Like in skeletal muscle, if you go on exercising your upper limb muscles, the muscles of the biceps will be hypertrophy, triceps will be hypertrophy. Similarly, in cardiac muscle, when the ventricle pumps does more work, the muscle hypertrophies. Okay. Now, as the muscle hypertrophies, its oxygen requirement increases. Because of the increased workload, already it is consuming greater oxygen. Now there is more muscle mass, so the oxygen requirement further increases. Now if the coronary vessels don't meet the requirements of the muscle, that is left ventricular muscle, then it results in angina, that is pain in the chest because of decreased blood flow to the cardiac muscle, or myocardial infarction where the muscles are dead because of absence of blood supply to the cardiomyocytes, or heart failure, that is the heart pump fails as a pump. How long it will go on pumping blood? There is a limit to it. So once the capacity exceeds, it will fail as a pump, that is called as heart failure. Right. So these are the effects, adverse effects of high blood pressure in the heart. On the blood vessels, it promotes atherosclerosis. The wall becomes thick. There is narrowing of the lumen, there is stiffness of the vessel, there is decreased compliance. Okay. So the vessels undergo atherosclerosis. On the CNS. So when the vessels undergo atherosclerosis, there is narrowing of the lumen, there is decreased blood supply to the brain resulting in cerebral ischemia, and when the lumen is completely blocked, it results in cerebral infarction. Okay, so this is because of atherosclerosis. Second, because of increased blood pressure, the small blood vessels in the brain, they start developing aneurysms, that is, they are called as microaneurysms. Okay, so these microaneurysms, because of increased blood pressure, they rupture, resulting in cerebral hemorrhage. So again, this is a cause for damage to the neuronal cells of the brain. So cerebral infarction, cerebral hemorrhage both result in stroke, that is, the part of the body which is controlled by the damaged brain area will be affected, resulting in stroke. Okay, so this is in CNS, so cerebral infarction, cerebral hemorrhage. The kidney, long-standing case of hypertension will result in proteinuria. So that's why usually hypertensive patients, they usually get tested for the urine protein estimation be routinely done to assess whether what is the effect of high blood pressure in the kidney. Then if the blood pressure is not controlled, then it results in renal failure by damaging the renal vasculature. Then effects on the retina. That's why hypertensive patients regularly undergo the examination of the eye, because to see the effect of elevated blood pressure on the retina. Okay, so again it results in it damages the small blood vessels in the retina. Okay, like narrowing, thickening, nicking, retinal hemorrhages, microaneurysms, in severe cases edema of the optic disc and macular edema. So the vision will be affected ultimately if the blood pressure again is not properly controlled. So these are all the effects of hypertension if it is not properly controlled. If the blood pressure are properly controlled, then you can minimize the adverse effects of high blood pressure on the heart, blood vessels, kidney, retina, CNS. Okay, right. So this was regarding the adverse effects of high blood pressure. Coming to the physiological basis of management. So whenever hypertensive, you get a patient, you record the blood pressure after giving 5 to 10 minutes of rest, you find that the blood pressure is high, and you ask the patient to record the blood pressure for a few days continuously, return back with the values, and you check that if the blood pressure is persistently high, then you go for treatment. If the blood pressure levels are not that high, which need immediate treatment, you can go for lifestyle modification. Okay, so lifestyle modification, it consists of weight reduction. If the person is obese and because of obesity the blood pressure is high, you can advise weight reduction. So how this weight reduction helps? For every 1 kg decrease in body weight, blood pressure decreases by 2 millimeters of mercury. Okay, so advice for weight reduction. Second is dietary modification. So advise the patient to reduce the intake of salt, to reduce the intake of fat, and to increase the high fiber content, that is high fiber diet, taking food rich in vegetables and fruits and green leafy vegetables, whole grains. So you're going to advise this, right? Then regular physical exercise. Regular physical exercise decreases the sympathetic tone and increases the vagal tone. So advice for regular physical exercise, and the best form of exercise is brisk walking. Brisk walking for about 30 to 60 minutes. So how brisk it should be? So the rate should be about 25% more than the normal walking rate. Is brisk exercise for 30 to 60 minutes. So this is the best form of exercise for high blood pressure patients. Then mental relaxation, because you all know that stress is an important cause of high blood pressure. Advise mental relaxation by doing yoga and meditation, and complete stoppage of smoking and reduction in the alcohol intake. So these are all our lifestyle modification which you are going to tell. So every patient should follow this, okay, lifestyle modification. Then it will help in controlling the blood pressure. Okay, if it is initially, if the blood pressure levels are not that high, with this only the patient may have good control over blood pressure. In spite of this, doing all this, if the patient's blood pressure levels are rising to high levels, then you have to go for antihypertensive treatment. Antihypertensive treatment is in addition to this. So the patient should follow all these things, that is weight reduction, dietary modification, exercise, everything. In addition, you are going to start antihypertensive treatment. Okay. So this is just a physiological base of management I am telling you, because it has been asked as a 10 marks question in previous exams, that is what is the physiological basis of management. So you all know that it is because of increased sympathetic activity acting on the vessels, causing vasoconstriction, increasing the blood pressure. So what you want to do, you want to give vasodilators. Vasodilators, by bringing about relaxation of the vascular smooth muscle, will decrease the blood pressure. Second, increased sympathetic activity is a cause of hypertension. So you block the action of increased sympathetic activity by giving antiadrenergic drugs. Okay, antiadrenergic drugs. So if you are giving antiadrenergic drugs, then the sympathetic neurotransmitter released from the sympathetic nerve endings can't act on those receptors. Then you can give calcium channel blockers. Calcium is an important agent which is required for the contraction of the vascular smooth muscle, contraction of the cardiac muscle, and in the conduction. So if you block the entry of calcium, then you prevent the vascular smooth muscle from contracting and resulting in vasodilatation. Diuretics. Increased blood volume increases the blood pressure. So by giving the diuretics, that is increasing the excretion of salt and water, you are trying to reduce the blood volume and trying to control the blood pressure. Okay. Then ACE inhibitors, angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, angiotensin receptor antagonists. So these are the available drug options that can be used in treating patients with hypertension. You can use a single drug or a combination of drugs depending on how well the patient is responding. Okay, so these are the list of drugs. Vasodilators, how they act? By relaxation of vascular smooth muscle and reducing the peripheral resistance. Vasodilators. Alpha adrenergic blockers. There are two types, alpha blockers, beta blockers. So alpha blockers decrease the blood pressure by blocking the action of norepinephrine on the blood vessels. Beta blockers decrease the blood pressure by blocking the action of sympathetic nervous stimulation on the heart, thereby reducing the heart rate and cardiac output. Okay, so there are two types of adrenergic receptors, alpha receptors and beta receptors. Alpha receptors are present on the blood vessels. So by blocking the alpha receptors, you block the action of norepinephrine, which is a neurotransmitter released by the sympathetic nerve endings on the blood vessels. Then beta blockers are present on the heart. By blocking the beta receptors, you are going to block the action of sympathetic nerve fibers on the heart, thereby reducing the heart rate and cardiac output. Okay, these are antiadrenergic drugs. Then calcium channel blockers. You need not draw or write everything about this. So why I am showing it is, so calcium entry is essential for vascular smooth muscle contraction. Calcium entry is important for cardiac muscle contraction. So if you block the action, if you block the entry of calcium by using calcium channel blockers, you bring about smooth muscle relaxation, vasodilatation. If you block the entry of calcium in the heart, you decrease the conduction velocity, you decrease the heart rate, you decrease the myocardial contractility. So this is the role of calcium channel blockers, right? Okay. Diuretics. Diuretics is, again I have told, blood volume increases the blood pressure. So by giving diuretics, you decrease the blood volume, reduce the blood pressure. Okay. Then angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors. So when we had studied the long-term regulation of blood pressure, we had seen this flow chart. Angiotensin 1 is converted to angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is a potent vasoconstrictor. Now if you block this enzyme, you prevent the formation of angiotensin 2. That is angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor. So by blocking this enzyme, you prevent the formation of angiotensin 2 and therefore you can regulate the, you can control the blood pressure. Okay. Then angiotensin receptor antagonist. Angiotensin 2 has already been formed, but its actions you are preventing by using angiotensin 2 receptor antagonist. So either you can prevent at this step, that is before angiotensin 2 is formed, or a second step, that is angiotensin 2 is formed, but it can't act on its target because its receptors are blocked. Okay. So this is the physiological basis. So when we ask you to write regarding the physiological basis of management, start from lifestyle modification, that is reduction in weight, dietary management, then exercise, stress relaxation. Then go for drugs. In drugs, you need not give examples. You can just write vasodilators, how they act. Anti-adrenergic drugs, how they act. Calcium channel blockers, how they act. Diuretics, how they act. AC inhibitors, how they act. We don't expect you to give examples. What are calcium channel blockers, name them, or angiotensin receptor antagonists, name them, nothing. You just write vasodilators, bring about vasodilatation, decrease blood pressure. Diuretics, decrease blood volume, decrease blood pressure. AC inhibitors, prevent the formation of angiotensin 2, decrease blood pressure. Clear? So this is what is the physiological basis of management. Okay. It is not a scary thing. Whenever you are seeing in exam physiological basis of management of hypertension, it is not a scary thing. It is all the physiology, what you have studied, you are going to write. Okay. Before going to hypotension proper, I have some case scenarios for you. First is 69-year-old man with no other medical problems has a blood pressure of 180/70 despite taking regular walks. What is this condition? 69-year-old man, here age is important, 69-year-old man. Then look at the blood pressure values, 180/70. And he is also having a good lifestyle. He is also involved in regular exercises. Blood pressure is 180/70. What is this? When I had told regarding the classification of blood pressure, I had stressed on this. 69-year-old man with blood pressure 180/70. Comment on the blood pressure values.
Systolic.
Systolic.
Comment on the blood pressure values. So case scenarios will be such case scenarios will be given to you in the exam. For example, this case scenario you take, 69-year-old man with no other medical problems has a blood pressure of 180/70. Comment on the blood pressure values. Then I'll go for what are long-term regulatory mechanisms, what are short-term regulatory mechanisms, how will you manage this case? What is the physiological basis of management? Okay. It will all be physiology questions only, but only thing a case scenario will be given and physiological aspects of that case scenario will be asked to you. Right. So comment on the blood pressure of the first case scenario, 180/70. What has happened to systolic blood pressure?
Isolated systolic increase.
Yes, very good. So it is isolated systolic hypertension. Okay. Systolic blood pressure is 180. Diastolic blood pressure is 70. Only the systolic blood pressure is increased. Diastolic blood pressure is normal. And look at the age, 69-year-old man. Okay, so it is isolated systolic hypertension. Right. Now, 38-year-old man has a blood pressure of 146 by 94. Comment on the blood pressure values. Comment on the blood pressure values. 146 by 94. Systolic blood pressure is 146, diastolic blood pressure is 94.
Stage 1 hypertension.
Yes, it is stage 1 hypertension. Very good. So 146 by 94. So you can go with the lifestyle modification. You can advise lifestyle modification and then continuously monitor the blood pressure of the patient. With lifestyle modification, if it is reduced, then he can continue with the same thing. But in spite of lifestyle modification, if it is not being controlled, then the physician can start with the antihypertensive drugs. Third one, interesting scenario it is. A 58-year-old woman returns to clinic and her blood pressure is 165 by 106. In the clinic, her blood pressure is 165 by 106. Okay. Then next part of the history. Although her blood pressure is consistently high in the clinic, ambulatory readings taken at home average about 138 by 85 millimeters of mercury. Comment on this.
White coat
Pre-hypertensive.
What, Pada, I couldn't hear you.
Pre-hypertensive.
Yes, it can be pre-hypertensive also, but what else? 138 by 85
White
is
coat hypertension.
Isolated systolic, ma'am.
No, because diastolic also is increased, 106 it is. Diastolic also is increased. So only when the person visits your OPD, gets the blood pressure recorded, only during that time the blood pressure is high. Otherwise,
White coat hypertension.
pardon, once again, repeat.
White coat hypertension.
Yes, very good. It is a case of white coat hypertension. So white coat hypertension is quite common. About 15-20% of the individual have white coat hypertension. Only when the blood pressure is being recorded in the OPD in presence of doctor, the blood pressure is high. But other time when the blood pressure is recorded during normal day-to-day activities of life, the blood pressure it is coming to almost, it is not as high as in the OPD. What is ambulatory? So new term you have learned here. Ambulatory readings. This is a new term. So what is ambulatory blood pressure monitoring? Ambulatory blood pressure monitoring is when the blood pressure is measured as and when the patient moves around and is having a normal daily life. It is measured for about 24 hours. Okay. This is ambulatory blood pressure monitoring. Okay. As the person is doing his normal day-to-day activities, the blood pressure will be continuously, it is getting recorded for 24 hours. So they are going to compare these ambulatory blood pressure monitoring with the clinic blood pressure recordings. If the ambulatory blood pressure monitoring is normal, okay, if it is normal, then no need of treatment. That is, the patient can go, can come back to you at regular intervals, keep a check on the blood pressure, okay. But white coat hypertensives, they have an increased incidence of hypertension in the near future. Therefore, they should regularly record their blood pressure. They should regularly visit the physician, okay. And if the physician feels that there is some target or organ damage is taking place, like there are some retinal changes, some proteinuria is present, then they can go for even antihypertensives also. Okay, clear? So ambulatory blood pressure recording. So these are three different case scenarios. One is isolated systolic hypertension, one is stage 1 hypertension, one is pre-hypertension with white coat hypertension. Okay, clear? So such scenarios will be given to you in exam. It is not that case scenario or case based questions are something out of the world and difficult to answer. Same questions will be given with the physiological questions like what is baroreceptor reflex? What is the physiological basis of management? What are long-term regulatory mechanisms? What is the role of diuretics? Such questions will be asked to you, right? So that was all about hypertension. Now there is one more term, hypotension. When the systolic blood pressure is less than 90 millimeters of mercury and diastolic blood pressure is less than 60 millimeters of mercury, it is called as hypotension. Okay. So there are three types: chronic hypotension, acute hypotension, postural hypotension. Chronic hypotension. These are different causes like chronic diarrhea, prolonged bed rest. The person has some illness because of which the person is bedridden for a long time. Then decreased secretion of pituitary hormones, decreased secretion of adrenal cortical hormones. These are some of the causes of decreased blood pressure. That is chronic hypertension. Acute hypotension, that is a person has met with an accident, loss of lot blood, therefore blood volume decreases, blood pressure decreases. Or the patient has episodes of severe diarrhea, severe vomiting, blood pressure decrease. So these are all acute hypotension, they have to be corrected. Okay. Then acute myocardial infarction patient, again the blood pressure may be low in such patients. This is called acute hypotension, sudden fall in blood pressure. Then postural hypotension. Postural hypotension is whenever the person assumes an erect posture following a lying down posture, the blood pressure, if it falls, that is particularly systolic blood pressure, if it falls by more than 20 millimeters of mercury, it is called as postural hypotension. So that is, I have been lying down in supine posture, then I stand, immediately my blood pressure falls by more than 20 millimeters of mercury, that is called as postural hypotension. So when blood pressure falls by more than 20 millimeters of mercury, immediately there is decreased blood flow to the brain, resulting in dizziness or fainting episodes. Okay, so again it could be acute postural hypotension or chronic postural hypotension. Acute postural hypotension, similar causes: acute hemorrhage, diarrhea, severe vomiting, sepsis. Okay, getting up from bed after prolonged illness or prolonged standing. These are all acute postural hypotension. Chronic postural hypotension, like autonomic neuropathy, because autonomic nervous system is playing an important role in controlling the blood pressure through baroreceptor reflexes. So if there is autonomic neuropathy, then the person will have episodes of hypotension once the person stands from lying down posture. So this is regarding chronic postural hypotension. Clear? So this was regarding the applied physiology of blood pressure, hypertension and hypotension with the case scenarios. Okay. So what you do is you study all the regulatory mechanisms, right? Then physiology, pathophysiology of blood pressure is a separate topic. It has been given a separate topic. It is well given in GKPAL. You can refer GKPAL for this. Okay. And prepare yourself for case-based case scenarios, for such questions will be asked you as a 10 marks question. Okay, it's all physiology questions only, but a case has been given to you, you must interpret. That's why you must know different classifications of blood pressure. What is stage 1, what is stage 2, what is stage 3. Okay, so read the classification of blood pressure and prepare accordingly for case scenarios. Any confusion, any doubts which people have? Any doubts? You can message me your doubts also. You can WhatsApp the doubts. Whenever I'll be free, I'll get back to you. You can even send the doubts in chat box. Now, if you are not having any doubts, you can read. Then you can WhatsApp the doubts to me. I will reply back to you as and when I am free. Now, even if you have any doubts, you can unmute yourself and ask, or else you can even ask your doubts in the chat box. Okay, anything else you want to know? Okay, so read the grading of hypertension, read regarding the regulation of blood pressure, very important question, very commonly asked, repeatedly asked, not only from academic point of view, even for your practice in future when you are treating patients, it is very essential to understand the pathophysiology. Okay, so blood pressure, now it starts in first year, second year you will be studying more in depth, third year, fourth year, internship, then throughout your life, this topic will be a burning topic. Okay, it is also, so blood pressure, hypertension is also called a silent killer disease. Okay, okay. Clear? Anything else you want to know? If nothing else, then I'll wind up the class. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.